Hello everybody, this is Dr. Habib. Today I want to go over the control of blood sugar in the body. So it all begins when we eat food. Now, the food that we eat is broken down in our mouth when we chew and is fed back to our brain, telling it that, hey, there's food in our mouth that needs to go down and it needs to be digested. So our brain sends a message through the vagus nerve, which is the parasympathetic control center for the entire digestive system, sends a message to the pancreas as well as digestive tract, amongst many other things. And the message that it sends says, there is food coming in. We need to make sure that we break this food down and get it into the bloodstream and then get it to all of the cells. So the pancreas starts to produce insulin, amongst other hormones and other molecules. And the digestive tract works to break the food down. So once we finish chewing, the food goes down into the stomach and is broken down using hydrochloric acid inside the stomach. It then goes down into the small intestine where it is absorbed into the bloodstream. Now that food that's broken down and goes into the bloodstream contains a very simple sugar called glucose. Glucose is the most simple sugar in our body. It's the form of sugar that goes into the cells and is used to create energy. Now that glucose also goes to the pancreas and feeds back saying, hey, blood glucose levels are going up. It's time to create something so that we can get that glucose out of the blood and into the cells. And so the pancreas is stimulated to create insulin. And insulin then goes into the bloodstream and goes to the cells through the bloodstream, attaching to the insulin receptor on each one of these cells, telling it to open up something called the glucose door, also located on the outside of the cell. It sends a message through the cell to open up the glucose door, thus allowing glucose to enter the cell. Once glucose enters the cell, and this is happening inside the cell, it is sent to the mitochondria, which is the engine of our cell. Every one of our cells has mitochondria except for our red blood cells, and they are in very high quantity in our brain and our heart. So glucose goes into the mitochondria and is used as the fuel to create ATP, or energy, in the body. Now there are 7 areas where this entire system can break down, leading to diagnoses of diabetes and high blood sugar. The first area where this system can break down is in the choice of food that we eat. Now if we tend to choose a food that is higher in glycemic index, high glucose, high sugar, such as sugars, dairy, and grain, then we tend to have a higher blood glucose because what we break down tends to have more sugar in it, thus leading to this diagnosis. It's also very important to remember that you need to chew your food correctly in order for digestion to be properly sequenced. So make sure that you're chewing the food that you choose properly to break it down, as your stomach does not have teeth. You need to be able to break that down in your mouth first. The second area where the system can break down is in the vagus nerve. Now, many people deal with chronic stress, which can lead to vagus nerve dysfunction or an inability to shift from the fight or flight side of the nervous system to the rest and digest side, the parasympathetic nervous system. So if your vagus nerve is not able to be stimulated and activated because you're in chronic stress, then you will not be able to feed back to your pancreas and to your digestive tract saying, hey, this is important, we need to get this food broken down. Now, if that's working and you're not chronically stressed and you're not eating in a stressful environment, then the glucose will enter the bloodstream. But in order for glucose to go to the pancreas, it requires vitamin D. We are, as a society, very deficient in vitamin D because we stay out of the sun and we sit inside our offices and our homes for hours and hours every day. So I would highly recommend getting your vitamin D levels checked because that determines if your glucose can get out of your bloodstream and into the pancreas to signal it that there is a requirement for insulin to be created. The next area where the system can break down is in the pancreas itself, where it needs to produce insulin. It requires zinc and magnesium. These are also nutrients that can be tested by your doctor to see if you are deficient in this. These two minerals are required in order to have the beta cells of the pancreas create insulin and thus secrete it into the bloodstream for this whole system to work. If all four of these are working, then you may still have a deficiency of chromium and vitamin B3, leading to insulin resistance. Now, the insulin receptor can only work if it has enough chromium and vitamin B3. And if it's not able to function because you're missing that vitamin or you're missing that chromium, then this leads to something called insulin resistance, where you can produce all of the insulin that you would like, but your cells will not react to it because the receptors are not being shown on the surface of the cells, and they're not functioning as they should. Now, if you don't have insulin resistance, you don't have this issue, you may be lacking calcium, which is required for the signal to be sent within the cell from the insulin receptor to the glucose door to open up that glucose door. So if you're deficient in calcium, then this could lead to glucose not getting into the cell. Now, once that glucose does get into the cell, if all 6 of these areas are working, you may still be suffering from an issue that can lead to that glucose not being used correctly inside the cell. So for the mitochondria to work correctly through the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, to create ATP, it requires coenzyme Q10, magnesium, and B vitamins. These are all things that can be tested for by your doctor in terms of the vitamins. However, the processes to make sure that all of these systems work require functional lab testing, which we can do for you in our office. So, a diagnosis of diabetes or high blood sugar does not simply mean that you have too much sugar in your diet or that you have too little calcium in your cell. Any one of these systems can break down at these 7 areas. So diagnosis of diabetes does not mean diabetes is diabetes. There are many different areas and specific things that each individual needs to ensure that is working in their system. It's important to remember that every chronic disease, sickness, and ailment can be traced to a nutrient imbalance. If you or someone you love is suffering from diabetes, feel free to email me or contact me at drhabib.ca, email me at navaz@drhabib.ca, or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to learn more. Thank you.